and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another book review for you, and that is for Somebody Help Me by Beverly Hastings. This is I would say a middle grade or young adult thriller is what I would probably define this book as. This was not a book that I planned to read. This was actually a special request from my wife, who read this book when she was a kid, and I believe her mother also before her read this as a kid, and she loved it. She's never been much of a reader. I believe, she enjoys like the Harry Potter books. She enjoys like Hunger Games, things like that, but is generally not much of a reader. And so she devoured this book as a kid. I believe she read it in one day, if my memory is correct, or at the very least over a very short period of time. So she found her copy of this recently and asked me specifically to read and review this book, and so that's what I did. And I read this book in one day because it's super short. It's less than 200 pages, pretty big font, pretty quick read in general. So I did just get through this in probably, I don't know, 2.5 hours. So very quick read anyway. So I did enjoy this book generally. I have a couple things that kind of bugged me about it, but I did generally like it. So I think the main plot of this book essentially is that there is this main character, this girl named Lori, who I believe is in high school, who basically in the middle of the night one night hears a voice of a child calling for help. And this repeats multiple times over the course of a few weeks. And she just kind of is trying to figure out why this is happening and where this is coming from and all this stuff. So that's kind of the main idea of this book, which was a pretty decent hook. And it starts like right from the beginning, like it's the first page. And so, it was something that I was like, okay, that is an interesting hook for the story. I don't know why this is happening, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I think this could be interesting. So that is well done. And the plot of this book in general, like I mentioned, to me, I would say it's a thriller. And to me, a thriller is very much plot-based and very much kind of moves the story along at a quick pace, which is helped by how short this book is. But there's not a whole lot of like extra stuff in this book. There's not a lot of fluff. It's very much like, here's the story, here's the characters. You get a little bit of depth and a little bit of background on the characters, a little bit of development for them. But generally it's like, okay, we're just going to tell the story, and that's basically going to be it. There's not going to be a lot of extra stuff outside of that. And I think it does a very good job of moving things along and telling the story. And in a way that I think made it, there was never really a point in this book where I was bored. It was just like, okay, things are moving along. This is all pretty interesting, and I enjoyed reading it over the course of the entire thing. So I think that was well done. I also liked the kind of slice of life aspect of this book, where I think this very much like tone-wise and in terms of the writing of the characters, especially the child characters, like the high schoolers and things, very much kind of feels like that somewhat, I don't know if romanticized is the right word, but the fictionalized version of like middle school, high school life that you tend to see in a lot of media. And I can think of some that kind of feels similar to me as this book. And so it's like, it doesn't feel fully accurate, but it feels authentic and it feels sincere in its depiction of that age and of that, like, the school life and being with your friends and those kinds of things. And it felt somewhat nostalgic to me, and it felt very like it just portrayed that very well in a way that I think works pretty well. And also kind of makes the characters who are, younger in this book, including the main character, a little bit more compelling, I think, because it through the dialogue, through the voice of the narrator, and just the writing style and things like that, it gets that feeling across, and I think that was done well. And I did like the characters as well. I think with the characters specifically, and even the plot as well, really, in most aspects of this book, considering how short it is, I think a little goes a long way here, where the characters are not fleshed out a huge amount, but they are fleshed out enough that, you can tell there's a little bit of depth to them. It's just not all right there. And so I appreciated that about this book. It's one of those things where like a little bit goes a long way when it comes to the characters and when it comes to the plot. So I enjoyed that as well. But as far as the couple issues I had with this, so first of all, I just, there's not a whole lot of depth to this book, I felt like, which is a kind of a strength in one aspect, but I feel like this would have been, to me, more interesting if it had been longer, and had things fleshed out a little bit more, and I think that is especially the case with the kind of entire reason this book happens with the voice that this character hears, because it's never really explained, and I don't think that's necessary to explain it. Sometimes things just happen to make a story happen. Like, for example, one of the things I mentioned, kind of getting the tone right of this kind of story in terms of dealing with this age group and things like that. I think of a video game like Life is Strange, which doesn't feel entirely accurate to me to that kind of thing, but it kind of has a similar vibe to it in portraying that stage of life and school and things of that nature. And that game as well, it's like, it's the same thing. There's something weird and possibly semi-supernatural happening that causes the plot to happen. It's never explained. So I don't, and I think it's fine there. I think it's fine here. It's not something that really needs to be explained. It's just something where I feel like either explaining it or just giving more to the story would have helped. Whereas I think it works very well in Life is Strange because, you get a lot more depth to the story and you get to see it employed in a lot of different ways, the kind of supernatural-ish element to that. And I think something kind of similar here, where if this book had been longer, had a little more fleshing out of the characters, a little bit more story to it, it might have landed a little more for me, I think. But it's one of those things where it's like, it doesn't bother me necessarily that much because it works fine, but it's just one of those things where it's like I wish there had been just a little more to that. But overall, I had a pretty good time with this book. It was enjoyable to read, very quick to read, very, like I said, the plot moves along quickly, it's short, so it's very much one of those books that I could just kind of sit down and just get through, which I think is a good thing about it, especially considering I would say this is more of a thriller type book. That's kind of what you want. So overall, I enjoyed this book. I'd give it, as far as a rating out of 10, I think I'd give it like an 8 out of 10. Not a book that like blew me away by any means, but one that I enjoyed and one that I had a good time with, despite a couple of like small little things that bugged me here and there. More so just wishing there was more to it, I think, more than anything. So that is pretty much all I got for you to talk about with this one. So if you happen to have read Somebody Help Me, what you thought of it, let me know in the comments. If you liked it, if you didn't, whatever, let me know down in the comments. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.